Hey, party people. Welcome back to my online whiteboard. Today we are going to discuss a series of questions I get a ton, which is I'm starting off from scratch. Who do I need to hire first? I want to build a team. Do I need to build a team? Who am I hiring first? What's my first step? Okay. Now, the general rule of thumb for any kind of business that you're starting is hire to your weaknesses. So basically, you want to hire people or partner up with people who know how to do the things that you don't know how to do. That's just kind of the blanket thing for all business. But we're talking about fashion design business. And I will go ahead and start off by saying this is what I'm familiar with. Don't ask me how to build a fashion PR business. I don't know how to build a fashion PR business, that sort of thing. All right. As you know, I do not blow sunshine up anyone's what's it, and I don't talk about things I don't know about. All right. So back to building a fashion design business. I'm going to go through with you the basic flow of how a product gets made and goes to market and gets mass produced. And then we're going to assign who does all of these individual tasks, some options, and at what point we need to start hiring someone, that sort of thing. All right. So first we start with an idea, and that is on you. I would say 99% of the questions I get are from people who have an idea, want to explore it, want to discuss the best way to go about taking it to market, whether the idea has any viability in market, that sort of thing. I have received the occasional, hey, I just have like a bunch of money and I want to be in fashion and I don't know how to design anything. Like, are you interested in working with me? And I don't know, most of those emails sound super scammy to me, so I just don't count those. Okay. Like, if you really had a bunch of money laying around, you would book an appointment with me. I'm just saying, like, just because something comes across your desk doesn't mean it's all legit. I'm just asking y'all to be careful out there. Okay. There's a lot of scammers out there. Anyway, the idea is on you most of the time. And most of you are happy to be the designer. Okay. I get a lot of questions from people who are like, oh, Zoe, can I just design stuff and sketch things and pass them off to other people? And can that be my career? No. You can do that later in your career once you've built up a reputation of being a solid designer. And being a solid designer means having learned this operational flow and certain chunks of tasks in this operational flow and good at overseeing this operational flow. Once you've built a name for yourself, a reputation for this kind of thing, then you could potentially like sell your designs and just be like, here are some sketches for your next collection. Ghost designers do exist, but they start off by building their fashion reputation before they can just go off selling sketches. The next step is technical development, which involves putting together your tech pack. And when I say that, it makes it sound, oh my God, the other day I was having a client meeting and they said, oh, you make it sound so easy online. I'm like, do I? I literally choked on my own spit. I was like, since when? I mean, I'm a very positive person. I think that if you put your mind to things, if you put in the work, if you put in the practice, people, like most anybody could do what they want to do. What's stopping them? But I think I always emphasize that it's hard work, that you have to put in the work, practice not magic, all these things. So when she was like, you make it sound so easy online, I'm like, I do what now? Girl, that's bananas. When I say make a tech pack, it's not really about the spreadsheet. The spreadsheet is the spreadsheet, but it's all the details that go into a spreadsheet, like, what do you want the fit to be like? How wide do you want this? What are the proportions of this? What is the fabric you wanted? What's the contrast? What are the colorways you want on it? what kind of buttons do you want it? What vendor do they come from? And what kind of taxes do we have to pay to get that vendor to ship those buttons from this other country? And there are a lot of moving parts on the tech pack. There is so much information, okay? You need to gather a lot of that information for whoever makes that tech pack, okay? That's going to be, so tech development is going to be you plus a technical designer. I want it to fit boxy. I want it to fit tight. I want it to be bodycon. I want it to be stretchy. I want it to not stretch. I want it cut on the bias. I want spaghetti straps. I want a 1/2 inch wide strap. All these little technical things that look kind of vague when you're first like sketching out like a sexy illustration or whatever. All of those little details have to be nailed down. And you are the source of that information. And you can have a technical designer help you format them in a clear, legible way that can communicate to factories, to pattern makers, etc. But that knowledge has to mostly come from you. Now in here, I want to insert sourcing and fabric development. I put that onto the side because sourcing is its own logistical nightmare. And you do have to do that yourself. It is part of the technical development. That whole like bill of materials bomb where you list what fabric is your self fabric, where you get it from, how much it costs, like what taxes are you paying on it because it's coming from X country, the yield that goes into your, all of that information, you need to have gone and sourced it yourself. Sourcing agents exist. I highly doubt you can afford one at this stage, okay? And also, sourcing is so tied into your original concept that you should be the one going out there and researching your fabric options, your materials options for your design idea. And I say this 100 million times, and I'm gonna say it again, a designer's true medium is fabric. That's why brands of markers I don't care about, but specific fabrics, if there's any one subject that a designer should learn more about, it's fabrics. I want you to go out there, hit some trade shows, feel fabric. I want you to go to some fabric stores, look at a row of denims and feel every denim. Read the end of the rolls and learn how many ounces each denim and how that correlates to how thick, how stiff, whatever the denim that you're feeling is. Take that knowledge with you to the trade show and talk to denim sales reps and be like, hi, I'm looking for a 14-ounce denim. That's the weight I want. Okay, so sourcing should be you. When you have a big giant company, you can have a sourcing department, people who do the sourcing. Okay, those people exist. But in the beginning, it should be you. Fabric development is kind of optional. This is when you decide that there's nothing in the market that exists to create your product. And so you start looking for someone who can create something, a new fabric just for you. And I don't really know exactly how to go about that because I've never done that myself where I sourced a brand new, previously non-existing fabric. But my where I would start is to talk to fabric sales reps at trade shows and ask them if they do anything custom, if they're willing to work on anything custom, because you could say things like, I see you do a lot of linen. I'm looking for a kind of linen, but something like this. Can you do something like that? Do you do any kind of special order weaving sort of thing? And have those conversations, okay? But that's you. Like, you should be doing those things. The next is your pattern. And patterns apply to wovens, to cut and sew knits like bathing suits and t-shirts. Even chunky knits can be cut and sew knits, like the whole fabric can be a chunky knit. What you need is a pattern maker. If you're experienced with making your own patterns, go ahead and make your own patterns if you feel comfortable doing so. And when I say experienced, I don't actually mean like I took some pattern making classes in college. I'm talking about people who took a lot of pattern making and technical classes in college. That was their major in fashion school. They did an extra master's program. They did another specialty pattern making internship. Like, someone who really focused a ton on pattern making and did internships involving technical and pattern making, like people who've been making patterns for themselves, like that sort of thing. Okay, so get a pattern maker, and you can just hire a pattern maker for a single project. You do not need a full-time pattern maker in the beginning unless you're doing a whole line launch. And listen, I have never said to anyone that just starting out that they should start with a full line launch. People have done it. I have never recommended it. And in order to do that, you have to have a lot of money and a lot of people willing to work with you for free. And that's why I can't recommend it to anyone. If you can make it work, that's on you. Good for you. Whatever you want to do. But pattern makers are expensive. But most of the people who come to me have no fashion background. Okay. And that's probably you watching this video. And so I always recommend, in particular to people who have no fashion background, to start small, to start with like 1 to 3 amazing products and build your reputation on those 1 to 3 things. People seem to think that if you don't start with a full lineup that you're not high fashion, but there are plenty of high fashion designer level companies that have started with a very limited launch. So don't let that stop you from entering any market category. You'll need a sewn sample, of course. Now, this is important. Not all pattern makers sew samples. Many pattern makers don't sew well or hate sewing, which usually go hand in hand. Okay? Some pattern makers, they hire their own sample maker and they are like, oh yeah, I have a sample maker who will cut and sew this. Some pattern makers are like, you're on your own. Okay? Some work for a bigger sample house where there are sample makers employed, but sewing and pattern making do not always go hand in hand. Okay, so please do keep that in mind. If you hire a pattern maker, always ask them, do you know someone who can sew the sample once you're done with the pattern? So I'm going to put sample maker separate, okay, very separate. Now, you're going to have to fit, and that's going to be on a fit model. And a lot of people like to use themselves as the fit model. I have mixed feelings about that. It kind of depends on who you are, who your market is. You know, like if you're doing more of a standard like fashion line, you should find a fit model where their job is literally to stay the same size forever. And, you know, so you can have a consistent fit across the board. A fit model should have the body that you want as your sample size to be the body representation. And I don't mean they're going to be in all your lookbooks or whatever, but that body really fits the customer that you're aiming for. And when you have a fit model, you can see the back. Okay? There have been occasions where, you know, I have friends who sew professionally or just for themselves, and they'll ask me to come over and fit their back because they can't see what's happening in the back. Okay? I've done that favor for people. Get a fit model. You don't need an in-house fit model. It's pretty rare that people have an in-house fit model because very few companies are churning over products so fast that you need to be fitting, like churning over new silhouettes. Okay, I should modify that. There are very few companies that are churning over new silhouettes so fast that they constantly need a fit model. Anyone who comes close to that is fast fashion, and they do not care about fit. So of course you need to correct your pattern, and then you need to start the whole thing again. Once you've corrected everything on the fit, then it goes back to your tech designer to revise the tech pack and put in any changes. And then your pattern maker, your sample pattern maker, needs to revise the pattern. A new sample needs to be sewn, and then the fit model called in again if necessary, and rinse and repeat until you have a beautiful sample that you're happy to go to market with. Another option, rather than hire individual people, is to hire a development house. Okay, there are a couple of there are a lot of different kind of formations of factories. You can find someone who just does samples. Okay, and they will have tech designers, pattern makers, sample makers. They have a fit model. They can do fit corrections, and they work with you with their team to do all the development parts of your idea. They may or may not help you with sourcing. I doubt they help with fabric development. That's why I kind of put this over here. But there are people who do all of this in one company. Okay, so anytime you work with a factory, like people all call themselves factories, and there's so many different kinds. Like, ask them if they do samples, ask them what points of the sample making process that they cover. Like, do they only do the production once the sample is done? Do they only do CMT? Like, we'll get there, but anytime you come across a factory that makes stuff, just ask. You have to be very specific in what they do. Okay, once you have your samples, you go into sales and marketing, you're going into market. And even very large companies have outside PR teams, outside marketing companies that they hire, that they contract to work for them, with them, whatever preposition you want to use there. And so do not feel the need to have in-house marketing and sales. The importance of social media is becoming more and more evident every day. You have a lot of options there. Social media can be done by yourself. Social media, you can hire someone to come in part-time, but they can come in like 15 hours a week, shoot tons of footage, schedule a bunch of posts to be dispersed throughout the week, lather, rinse, repeat. And then, so that's like a little bit separate. You can also hire marketing and PR firms to handle your social media. I had this conversation with the client. We were talking about why she needs a separate social media from herself to the one for her brand. Because a lot of the time, you know, you're kind of starting out and you already have kind of a following, and people are invested in your journey as a fashion designer. So they're following you on Instagram, and then you're like, oh, I have Instagram for my brand, and like no one really goes over there. You have a much smaller presence on your brand. First of all, that's not always going to be the case. Okay, it might, but it may turn out that your brand maybe has a smaller following, but still has a consistent, steady, growing following of its own. And the two don't always overlap. Some people don't care about your personal life or your journey or your growth at all, but they want to know what deals are happening at your brand, you know, when new product is dropping on your website, that sort of thing. Also, later on, when you get to the sales and marketing and you've grown enough that you feel that you can hand your social media off to someone else to run it, you don't want them reading your private DMs because you have your personal and your business all linked up together. Okay? Ask me how I know. That's not a personal story. I actually have a friend who had like handed off their Instagram to a PR firm, and they were not respectful about his personal DMs. It was a thing. He fired them. It was a whole thing. So you definitely want to keep those things separate. So anyone who is running your social media for you, in-house, outside firm, you don't want them in charge of all of your stuff, all your personal stuff. You know, keep those things separate. Now, when it comes to sales, you should go watch my Fashion Business 101 video for more information on fashion sales. So it kind of depends on whether you want to do wholesale or you want to do direct to consumer. You can go the sales rep route, which you hire. They do not sit around in your office making phone calls. They work from home. They work from the road. You can hire a showroom, and that's an office outside of your office. So all of these are like kind of outside entities. And so you don't have to worry about having an in-house team until much later. Let's talk about websites and online stores, okay? If you're doing wholesale only, okay, you're not selling directly yourself. If you're doing wholesale only, you do need a website, and your website should have pretty pictures of all your products. You probably don't need to update your website very often. You'll be updating your social media more, but you do need a website have it parked with your brand name, and you could just get a freelancer to do that sort of thing. Okay. If you have a store, okay, again, whether you do wholesale plus your own store or only direct to consumer, you need someone who's going to manage your online store. And how much time that takes will depend on how fast you keep adding and taking out designs. You're like keeping track of your inventory, keeping track of customer service. All those things is really going to depend on how fast that's growing. And so if you are doing any kind of in-house sales, wholesale or D2C, then you need to think about maybe start hiring someone to get involved with the customer service, sales, website updating aspect of your business. Now, if this is something you're strong in, like let's say I have no fashion background whatsoever, and I got everyone at this dev house to do all of my samples, but this is my background. Anything on a computer I can do. I'm going to do this. This could be you. This could be you. This could be someone that you have starting part-time. Okay? They don't even need to be in an office with you because everything is online. They can work from home. You can have a contract where they work, certain hours a week to take care of specific online tasks. So you've made your samples, you've gone to market, and now you have orders to cut. Okay? So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to grade your pattern. I lied. The first thing you're going to do is make a production pattern. Okay. Now, production patterns are different from sample patterns. They do a lot of things. They do things like put in all the correct seam allowances. Samples, they typically, they will just put a 1/2 inch seam allowance on everything and kind of finesse things so that all the samples look nice. But once you've done all the development and you finalized what kind of seams you're going to put on everything, what kind of hem you're going to put on everything, like those seam allowances may change. You have your final fabric and you have the width of your final fabric and you lay it out and you create markers. And if you see that if you just cut this corner by 1/2 inch, then you're going to save so much fabric by being able to move everything closer together. That's going to be a production pattern thing, okay? There may be things where a production pattern will see something and see that if they change the pattern a little bit, then the sewing operations will be simpler and they'll change that. Kind of depends on how good your production pattern maker. But sample pattern makers and production pattern makers are often not the same person, okay? They have different skill sets. And, sample pattern makers, they'll see whatever random crazy ass idea that designers come up with. There are so many that are just absolutely nuts, and they'll be able to run with it, which is a skill set on its own. I promise you. Sample pattern makers require so much patience working with the whims of designers. And listen, I'm talking smack about myself when I say that, okay? But production patterns, they are really focused on how to maximize fabric usage, how to minimize costs, how to maximize efficiency in the sewing room, that sort of thing. So you make your production pattern and then you grade it. Some people grade up here, I don't. Because if a sample doesn't end up being sold, like nobody wants it, then you have gone through all the effort and money and time of grading a pattern that will never see the light of day. Okay, so I grade here. Once I get orders, once I see that people really want a style, okay, so grading, and then the size set. If you have a new silhouette, brand new silhouette, you're making jeans for the first time, do a graded size set. Get all your friends and friends of friends who are in your size range to go try them on because, yeah, you fit according to your fit model, according to your customer profile, but everyone is going to wear your jeans. So you want all the 12s, 16s, 24s, size 4, size 8, like all the ladies to try on your beautiful jeans, all right? Now, if the next season you're just introducing more colors or maybe you're adding flares, okay, where the waist, hip, and thighs are the same, but you've decided flares are coming back, you don't need to do a size set. If all the parts that really fit against the body are already set, you don't need to do another size set. You do need to grade it because you just need the graded patterns, but you don't need to do a size set for those. If I had a dollar for any time people asked me to make a grading video, I would have retired by now. Um, but I don't know. I graded one t-shirt to learn what grading is in fashion school because my background is design and I've always just sent my stuff out to be graded. I do not grade. I don't know how to grade. And it's not important for designers to know how to grade. And that is a hill I will die on. I always say that it's good for every designer to learn more and more skills, and the more things they can learn about the process is great. But I wouldn't prioritize grading out of learning all of these things. If you want to learn it, do I think it's bad? No, it's not bad to learn grading. It's not bad to learn anything about your area, your industry. Is it a priority? Not unless you're going to go into the production side of things, go into this stuff. But as designers, no, not a priority. Fight me in the comments. Don't fight me, okay? I really like when people disagree with me politely. Thank you. CMT, cut, make, trim. And I emphasize this because some people do advertise themselves as a specifically CMT factory. A vertically integrated production facility is someone that has a bunch of tasks in their one factory and they're able to do a bunch of these things, okay? It used to be, listen, when I was very first starting in the industry, I used to, downtown LA, in the heat of the LA sun, I used to go out there with these massive rolling bins, okay? I'd push an empty one up Los Angeles Street, visit the cutting factory, take bundles, cut bundles for our white cotton twill pants, throw a sheet over them so they don't get dusted by the freaking car pollution of Los Angeles Street, and then wheel them to a sewing factory. That happens less now. I mean, I'm sure these things still happen, but these vertically integrated production facilities, these cut, make, trim, CMT factories, they're growing more and more. These factories, especially domestic factories that are trying to hold on to their customers, they offer more and more services. And it's also like, you have to pay your assistant designer to push rolling bins of cut pants up and down. Like, it's expensive. If you're not doing that, if you're shipping all your cut things over to a different factory. I also worked at a different place where we did a bunch of in-house cutting, but we didn't have a lot of in-house sewing. And so somebody would come and pick up cut bundles. And so anytime you have to move things places, okay, number one, you're in danger of losing things. Number two, you're losing time. Like, it's not very efficient. But there are still things that require it. Like that particular circumstance, there are not a lot of people who know how to sew leather. And so it was worth it to that company to have that specific, sewing factory come pick up cut bundles, because they couldn't cut leather, because that is also highly skilled and separate. But we had leather cutters so there are circumstances in which all these cut bundles need to move. But more and more, there are places that will do the whole shebang, or at least the production stuff. Like, there are plenty of places where they do not want to get involved in the sample making of it all. Okay, they're only really interested in production because that's when they think most designers get serious. Like, oh, they have orders, they have to ship now. Now they're going to be serious. There are a lot of people who get disinterested There are people who get disinterested up here. Okay, they find out that fashion is not just, fun and giggles, and they just decide to give up on their idea. And so a lot of places don't even care to work with designers, but then they come and they're like, oh, I need 100 dresses. They're like, oh, you have orders. Okay, you're going to take this seriously now. And so that's a lot of factories. And so they do only production. I don't know of a single factory that also does sales and marketing. That's why I put them kind of separate, like in a different color here, even though this is the order of the flow, okay? Cut, make, trim. That's what CMT means, okay? So cutting is cutting. M, sewing. T, trim. Trim is anything on a garment that is not fabric. So adding buttons, adding zippers, adding embroidery, cut, make, trim. People ask me all the time, is it important to know how to sew when you're a fashion designer? And listen, if you're going to learn anything as a fashion designer, I would say you learn sewing before grading, okay? Grading is so low on the priority list. Let me tell you why. This is a skirt I designed a million years ago, okay? And I also designed this embroidery. So what happened with this skirt? Order of operations for putting the skirt together. All the pieces were cut. And then because this embroidery was so wide, okay, and it's not an applique, the embroidery is stitched directly onto the denim, we had to sew these panels together, send these 3 panels off to the embroiderer. Then they embroidered this whole thing and sent it back so that the sewer could sew the rest of the skirt. There will be factories where they do everything. Like they even have embroiderers that they work with. So they'll cut it, they'll sew these 3 panels, and then they'll send it off to their embroiderer. Or you could have an embroiderer you like, and they send it off to your embroiderer. They get it back from the embroiderer, and then they have to sew the rest of the thing. So yeah, yet another reason why understanding the construction of things, while not necessarily knowing how to sew beautifully, can help you in part of the design process, because this is expensive. This whole process of cutting it, sewing a little bit, sending it off, bringing it back, and then sewing the rest is like, it's expensive. It's expensive. Is the effect beautiful? I mean, I really liked it. I still really like it. And could we have done a patch maybe? And then they sew these 3 panels, they sew on the patch, and then they move on with the rest of the sewing. Could that have been more cost efficient? Yes. But yeah, you do need to think of these as separate steps and not just, I sent my fabric to the factory and then I got this dress back. And then the end is shipping and distribution. The factory ships to you, and then you got to figure out what to do with it, right? If you're wholesale, you're going to order 100 dresses of this style and 100 dresses of this style. And then each of the stores will get they wanted 6 of this and 6 of this. Somebody wanted 10 of these and none of these. You're going to separate out all your orders and you're going to ship out. That's wholesale. If you're going to keep some inventory behind for your online store or your brick and mortar store, then you need to keep track of that inventory. Or you could look into kind of these warehouse management situations where when they get an order, like let's say you get an online order and it hooks up with their system and they see you get an order and they ship things out. Such systems exist. I am not an expert on those systems. Everything you see here can be done the first season by hiring people on a contract basis, like your sample makers, or on a part-time, like building a store, running your social media. Okay, all these people can be done part-time. These factories, they're just doing things by, your contract ends when the production run ends. Okay, there's no such thing as, holding a factory on retainer or anything. They are too busy, especially with beginner designers with small orders. That's not a thing that exists in our industry. Okay, so they take your order, you ask them, you could have worked with them before, and if you ask them hey, do you have time to do this? They might say no. They might have gotten too busy for your next order. Okay, so these are all contract basis. So at the end of the day, you don't need any full-time employees to start your business unless you know of someone who is so good at overseeing so much stuff that you hire them to do a bunch of this stuff for you. But then again, if you're hiring someone to do a bunch of this stuff for you, what are you doing? Just providing money? I mean, that's valid. That's valid too. Maybe you just have idea and a bunch of money and you're somebody else do it. Then hire someone who has an experience working in design for smaller companies that know all these various steps. People with corporate backgrounds, they tend to just be in their own situation and they have a limited task list because the company is so big that they just do the same thing for a lot of different things. Like there are a lot of designers, all they do all day is make flats and fill in information for tech designers, and there's textile designers and tech designers doing their own separate thing within these larger companies. So if you want somebody who's doing a lot of this stuff, who has their fingers in all these pies, you're going to want a designer who has industry experience working in smaller brands where they're more involved in more steps of the process. That was a lot. I know. If you need to watch it again, watch it again. But that was a lot. If you want to book an appointment with me so that I can overview your specific business, my Calendly link is in the description below. Please thumbs up this video, share, subscribe, all the ways you show me love, and I will see you in the next video.